The top tips for new drone pilots. I'm gonna walk you through it. Don't go anywhere. Hey everybody, David here from Aerial Influence. Thank you so much for stopping by. Today we are talking about the top tips for new drone pilots. Are you somebody that got a drone for Christmas and it's been sitting on your shelf for the last month because you're a little bit nervous to fly it? Or are you somebody that's getting ready to purchase a drone? I'm gonna walk you through all these tips. But first I gotta thank the sponsor of this video, that's AUTOPYLOT. AUTOPYLOT is an app where you can get FAA LAANC approval to fly. Now I'm gonna tell you more about that and what that process entails a little bit later, and I'll tell you all about AUTOPYLOT as well. But first we gotta get to some of these tips for new drone pilots. So let's start with number one. Research your drone. Now this goes for people that already have their drone already or for people that are looking to get their drone. It's important to do research. YouTube is a great tool to find out all the information you need about your drone. Lots of videos from the DJI Avata all the way up to the Matrice 300 RTK. If you need to know something about a drone you're thinking about buying, YouTube is a great resource. Next up is don't overspend on your drone. Now, if you're somebody that's already purchased your drone, too late, sorry, whatever you've done, you've already done. But if you're looking to purchase a new drone, if you're somebody that is just taking videos, taking pictures for social media, keeping it for a personal account of what you're doing, the DJI Mini 3 Pro is pretty much all you're gonna need. And really, I think for a large portion of drone flyers in this country, the Mini 3 probably is enough for them. So it's important, you don't wanna go out and buy a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 drone or a $15,000, $30,000 drone when really all you need is something much smaller and much less expensive. So make sure you don't overspend, do your research, know what you're going to use the drone for before you put a big chunk of money down. Next up, this one's really easy. Once you have your drone, make sure you go to the FAA's website and register your drone. I'll put up the website right here so you can see exactly where you need to go. But you gotta go, you gotta pay $5. They're gonna give you a number that is now basically the license plate number for your drone. You need to affix that number somewhere on the drone so that people can see it. But really important step, but a really easy step. It's something quick and easy, but you gotta do it because legally you just have to. Okay, now you've registered your drone. Now what you gotta do is get legal to fly your drone. How do you do that? You go to the FAA's website again. You're gonna take what's called a trust test. Now that is if you are just a recreational flyer. The trust test, it's actually very easy. It's multiple choice. You get to go through. If you get something wrong, you get to go back and correct it so you can't fail. It's really just so that you have the basics of flying a drone. That's for recreational purposes. If you are a professional or if you're wanting to fly your drone for money, you're gonna have to get your FAA Part 107. You can find more information out on the FAA's website about that. And there are dozens of tutorials and study guides and all sorts of stuff for that FAA Part 107 test. That one is proctored, you can fail it, so you gotta make sure you study, especially if you don't know already the airspace in our country, then you definitely are gonna need to study for it. It's not hard, very similar to a driving test, but you definitely do need to study. All right, so you got your drone, you've registered it, you've taken your trust or your FAA Part 107 test. Now you're ready to get to know exactly what your drone can do. Really what you need to do is go through the manual because that's important. There are different things in the manual. It's gonna tell you safety guides. It's gonna tell you battery maintenance, all sorts of stuff. So really make yourself familiar with the manual, make yourself familiar with your drone. Don't take your drone out in -20-degree weather if it's only rated to go at -4 degrees. So it's important to know what the capabilities of your drone are. And again, that's going through the manual, that's doing research online, that's going to YouTube, but everything that you can do to get as much information, as much knowledge as you can about this drone before you take it up for your first flight. All right, now that you're ready to actually go out and fly your drone, you gotta take it slow. Don't go out there and start speeding around, going full speed, throwing it into sport mode, doing that kind of stuff. Go out in the middle of nowhere, there's no trees around you, nothing that's gonna get in your way. Get the drone up in the air, take it up to 100 feet and just let it hover there. Get to know the controls. Go forward, go backward, go up, go down. Learn how to pivot the drone. Go through all of those movements before you go higher and higher. And then you're gonna get a little more confidence. You go a little further away from the remote, a little further away from the remote, and suddenly you're flying like an old pro. So make sure you take it slow. Don't get too eager to go out there and just completely rip this thing through the air, because that's not gonna be a good idea. That's how people end up losing their drones. Next up is listen to your drone. And what do I mean by listen to your drone? It's actually two things. You can actually listen to the propeller. So if your drone is flying and it kind of sounds a little bit off, that could be an issue with either a propeller being chipped, or it could be an issue with the motor. So make sure you're listening for things like that. Your drone will sound different than it normally does. The other thing you need to listen for from your drone is on the remote control. You're gonna get beeps and alerts and all sorts of stuff that are going on. Don't ignore those. You wanna know if there is an airplane in your airspace. So if your drone tells you that, don't just ignore it. Make sure that you're paying attention to what's going on. If it tells you it's too windy out, listen to that. Bring your drone back home. If it's way too windy for your drone, bring it back home. You definitely don't want it wrecked because you just weren't paying attention to the alerts that were coming on your screen. So you gotta listen to your drone, make sure you understand what your drone is actually telling you so that you can get your drone back in one piece. All right, now let's talk about the anti-collision sensors. They're great on all of these drones, on all the DJI drones, all the Autel drones. They're great. 360 degrees, even with the Autel drone, I think they say 720 degrees protection. They're kicking it up to 11 there. But they do have great sensors on them, but do not trust those sensors. Don't get in the habit of trusting the sensors. What you want to do is trust yourself. Don't get too close to something where those sensors are going to have to go off to begin with. So don't trust the sensors, trust yourself, fly responsibly and fly safely. Speaking of getting too close to things, use your zoom lens. There are people out there that forget that they have these high-powered zooms on many of these drones, and honestly, on all of these drones, there's some sort of zoom range. So say you're doing an inspection of a cell phone tower. Instead of having to fly up and be like, 10 feet away from this dangerous tower, you can be back 200 feet and literally zoom right in on it and not have to worry about your drone getting too close to something. So use that zoom range. It's there for a reason. All right, next up is drone with a buddy. Take a friend with you. They can be your visual observer. It makes things easier to fly when somebody else can be keeping their eye on a drone and you can really focus on how you're flying. So take a friend out there. They're gonna learn something, you're gonna learn something, and really it's just more fun with somebody else. Next up is keep up with all the rules. You've taken your test already, so you've gone through that stuff. But every year there are changes to laws and rules, so make sure that you are staying up to date on what those laws and rules are. For instance, you can't take off from a national park. Well, if you're not keeping up with the rules and with the regulations, you don't know that. You try to fly your drone in the middle of the park and you end up getting arrested and getting your drone taken away. So really important, keep up with the rules, know exactly what's going on in the drone world, and that way you're gonna keep yourself out of trouble. Next up, you need to get LAANC approval from the FAA, which is where today's sponsor, AUTOPYLOT, comes in. Now, just a note, we don't do a lot of these sponsorships. We would only do something like this for a product that we like, that we've tested, and that we actually use. So we don't do many of these things. This was sort of an exception we made because we really, really like the app. So let me tell you a little more about AUTOPYLOT. It takes the guesswork out of figuring out where you're legally allowed to fly. You can find locations by searching and dropping a pin. It can let you know if a planned flight location is in Class G, controlled or restricted airspace. There's a pre-flight checklist. They give you weather conditions, inform you of temporary flight restrictions, and most importantly, AUTOPYLOT is an FAA-approved supplier of LAANC. What is LAANC? It stands for Low Altitude Authorization and Notification Capability. What does that mean to you? It means that if you're trying to fly in controlled airspace, you need to get approval from the FAA, which you can do in seconds in some cases using AUTOPYLOT. So you have to get FAA approval, and AUTOPYLOT is our preferred app. So thank you, AUTOPYLOT, for sponsoring this video, and thank you for doing what you do, because it's a very, very useful tool. You gotta get LAANC approval before you fly. All right, so you got FAA approval. Now it's time to go out and fly your drone, but you got to check one more thing, and that is the DJI Flysafe database. This is only if you own a DJI drone. I'll tell you, you don't have to worry about it. But with DJI, they do what's called geofencing. So if you're flying near like an airport, a federal building, or a prison, something along those lines, they have actually mapped these certain areas out and have actually deemed them unflyable. Now, why are they unflyable? Because it's just out of safety precautions. And I understand they don't want just anybody going out and flying, you know, over a football stadium or something like that. So they block certain areas off so that you can't actually fly there. But if you go to their website, which I'll put up here and down in the description, you can actually see that map and exactly where those places are that they've locked off. And if you happen to be near one of those areas, you can then start the process of trying to get it unlocked. So make sure you check your DJI Flysafe database as well before you go out on some big important job, because we want to make sure that you can get your drone up in the air. All right, so the last tip is go out there, have fun, use your imagination, and be safe. You're gonna be amazed by the things you can do with this drone and the ideas that you're gonna have once you get the remote in your hands and once you have that drone up in the air. I think you're gonna be amazed by the ideas that you come up with on how you use these drones. And what I want you to do is in the comments, let us know, how are you using your drone, or how are you planning on using a drone in the future? Are you gonna use it to make money? Are you gonna use it just for fun? Let us know down in the comments. We really appreciate you guys stopping by. We work really hard on these videos. So if this is something you like, give us a like and a subscribe. We also want to thank today's sponsor one last time, AUTOPYLOT. Make sure you guys check out their app. We'll see you next time.